Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Randy Spronk, the lesser known of the two Spronk brothers. I'm a producer from Edgerton, Minnesota. I'm past president of the National Pork Producers Council, which obviously, as Becca mentioned, we deal with the policy side of it. I also serve on the International Marketing Committee of the National Pork Board, the checkoff side. That would be your funding organization. That's where the funds come to fund a lot of the export policies that are over on U.S. Meat Export Federation. I also serve, as said earlier, on the U.S. Meat Export Federation on the executive committee, which is responsible for exporting beef, pork, and lamb worldwide. We just got done for the budget for 2019. It'll be just a little bit over $43 million. The U.S. Meat Export Federation actually has offices in over 40 countries worldwide, and that's become very critical to our ability to export product into those countries. So these organizations work collaboratively to ensure pork producers like me can send our products around the world. Their efforts, along with the U.S. trade officials at USDA and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, have helped us to become, over the past 10 years, the #1 exporter of pork in the world. In any given year, we export pork products to over 100 countries. Exports are vital to the livelihoods of America's pork producers, adding significantly to the bottom line of each hog farmer. Last year, we exported 5.4 billion pounds of pork, a record valued at over $6.5 billion. That represented almost 27% of U.S. production and added over $53 to the value of each hog marketed. To put it in perspective, the average price received for a market hog in 2017 was $149. Exports support about 110,000 jobs in the U.S. pork and allied industries. But that creates a dichotomy. Because exports are economically significant, having them restricted or losing them means significant economic harm to producers. Right now, U.S. pork producers face a number of challenges that make that a real possibility. Because U.S. pork is the world's top exporter of pork, makes an attractive candidate for trade retaliation. Currently, we have the dubious distinction of being on 3 retaliation lists: China and Mexico related to U.S. actions on steel and aluminum imports, China in response to U.S. tariffs imposed over issues related to intellectual property theft and forced transfers of U.S. technology. China and Mexico are very important export markets for U.S. pork. China, the #2 volume market at more than 495,000 metric tons, our #3 value market at $1.1 billion in 2017. Mexico, our largest volume market, #2 in value, taking almost 802,000 metric tons of pork, worth more than $1.5 billion last year alone. These 2 countries alone accounted for 40% of total U.S. pork exports and 81% of our variety meat exports in 2017. Those markets are in jeopardy because of the ongoing trade disputes the United States has with both of these countries. China, which already had a 12% tariff on pork imports, on April 2 put an additional 25% duty on a host of American products, including pork. This was in response to U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. On July 6, it levied another 25% tariff in retaliation for U.S. tariffs on $34 billion of Chinese goods because of the theft of U.S. intellectual property and forced technology transfers. This brings the total tariff on U.S. pork and pork variety meats in China to 62%. Mexico, where U.S. pork industry has shipped product at a 0 tariff rate under NAFTA, on June 5 imposed a 10% duty on pork imports in response to U.S. steel and aluminum import tariffs. The retaliatory tariff increased to 20% on July 5. Never a good time to have export disruptions, but timing now is particularly bad. Our U.S. pork industry was in the middle of an expansion predicated on past profitability, and because expected exports to grow. Production is expected to grow by nearly 8% over 2018 and 2019. That expectation is well-founded. We were anticipating more access to Japan and Vietnam under the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, also known as TPP. And under existing free trade agreements, we were counting on shipping more pork to Australia, Canada, Central America, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, and South Korea. Export prospects also prompted construction of 5 new pork packing plants, which by next year will increase the packing capacity by 10% over a 2015 level. In fact, the pork industry expected to process a record number of hogs this year, over 127 million pigs, up from a little over 120 million last year. Obviously, things have changed. Chinese duties have had a negative effect on U.S. pork exports to China, with shipments through June down by 9% for the year. Over the past 2 months, the United States has exported almost no pork products to China. Exports to Mexico down only slightly through the first 6 months of the year, but doesn't reflect exports since tariff on U.S. pork went from 10 to 20% the first part of July. July pork export volume was up slightly from last year, but came at a lower price, especially from Mexico, where the value dropped by nearly 25%. The U.S. Trade Representative's Chief Agricultural Negotiator, Greg Dowd, recently summed up the current state of affairs. The tip of the spear in all of this right now is your pork. A January 2018 Iowa State University analysis forecast modest profits for U.S. pork for 2018. A subsequent study from March, when rumors about China's initial 25% retaliatory tariff began circulating, May hog futures fell by almost $18 an animal. That's an industry-wide loss of more than $2 billion in annualized basis. Not all the loss can be attributed to the tariffs, but most of it can be. Pork producers feeling financial pain because of the current trade disputes, but we recognize the Trump administration is trying to make global trade more reciprocal and advantageous to the U.S. The President is committed to strengthening American agriculture and the rural economy. Producers acknowledge tax and regulatory reforms that have been made and implemented have set a course for a significantly improved economic growth. Producers also understand the administration is balancing many interests trying to realign U.S. trade policy, putting trade and economic security at the center of national security and foreign policy. Redefining trade relationships with China and modernizing NAFTA are very complex matters. President Trump, Agricultural Secretary Perdue, and other administration officials have made it clear they have the back of the American farmer. The administration did recently announce a farmer aid package. We appreciate it, but producers like me want resolutions to these trade disputes so we can export more pork. The best outcome for us is the restoration of lost trade and the opportunity to increase our pork exports. Maintaining, even expanding existing markets and opening new ones would go a long way to relieving our collective anxiety and blunting effects of the retaliatory tariffs. For the U.S. pork industry, export growth potential to countries around the globe is enormous, particularly as people in developing nations add meat to their diet, and that includes China. The U.S. pork industry alone could put a huge dent in the U.S. trade imbalance with China if that country were to eliminate its punitive tariffs on pork and its numerous trade barriers. We are encouraged by the announcement of a trade deal with Mexico, but we're still being affected by Mexico's 20% punitive tariffs today. Those duties are really hurting me and other producers in this room, and we need the United States and Mexico to quickly resolve this issue. In the new Mexico-U.S. trade deal, we and others in U.S. agriculture were successful in beating back a seasonal and perishable proposal that we believe would result in more trade cases against the U.S. and Mexico. We weren't successful in preserving the Chapter 19 dispute settlement mechanism, but we may have another bite at the apple in the ongoing negotiations with Canada. We don't want to have to go to court with Canada or Mexico to defend a trade case. We want a dispute settlement panel. Our top priorities are renegotiate trade deals with Mexico and Canada, resolution of the aluminum and steel trade dispute with Mexico, and resolution of the trade issues with China. Just as importantly, the U.S. needs to start opening new export opportunities for U.S. pork. Free trade agreements increase our exports significantly. The pork industry has been urging the Trump administration since the president took office to begin negotiating new free trade agreements, particularly with countries in Asia, starting with Japan. That nation is our #1 export value for U.S. pork products, for now. Japan recently concluded trade agreements with the European Union and is part of a recently finalized comprehensive and progressive trade agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP 11. Both trade deals could begin eroding U.S. market share in Japan as pork from the EU nations and other TPP countries enter at an eventually much lower tariff than U.S. pork. A U.S. free trade agreement with Japan would expand the overall size of the Japanese market and give its consumers access to internationally priced, high-quality pork. It would restore the U.S. to a level playing field in Japan, as all other significant competitors will soon benefit from an agreement with Japan. The administration did recently open a couple of new markets to U.S. pork, Argentina and Paraguay. It's working with the industry to open other markets such as Brazil, India, and Thailand. In fact, the U.S. Trade Representative Office in May accepted NPPC's petition to review Thailand's generalized system of preferences benefits over its de facto ban on U.S. pork. Thailand is the second largest recipient of trade benefits under U.S. GSP program, but it maintains tariff and non-tariff barriers to U.S. pork products and many other agricultural commodities. Non-tariff barriers, what you know as sanitary and phytosanitary, or SPS measures, are a significant problem in quite a few countries around the world, including China, as noted earlier. Thailand, for example, has a ban on pork from hogs fed ractopamine, restrictions on uncooked pork, meat products, and offal. The European Union, which is as a bloc is the second largest consumer of pork in the world, has SPS restrictions on U.S. pork, including trichina mitigation and a prohibition on pathogen reduction treatments. Those SPS measures, plus restrictive quotas and tariffs, limit our exports there to less than 0.5%. In the EU, which is a large pork consumer, we send more pork to Honduras than we do the entire European bloc of countries. We need to address those SPS issues either by reconsidering countries' preferential trade treatment, such as the GSP program, or through trade agreements that eliminate such non-tariff barriers. And obviously the final issue I want to mention that could affect our ability to export pork: foreign animal diseases. U.S. pork and all of animal agriculture needs to be better prepared for all foreign animal diseases. We're all well aware that China recently confirmed its reportedly 21st case of ASF, and it continues to spread, along with the discovery of ASF in Belgium, and it's spreading throughout Eastern Europe. Those organizations that I mentioned earlier are working diligently to take steps to keep it out, and the livestock industry needs a vaccine bank to deal with an FMD outbreak. In closing, exports are vital to the success of U.S. pork industry, which supports more than 500,000 jobs, mostly in rural America. But punitive tariffs on U.S. pork in 2 of the top 3 markets present major challenges to U.S. pork producers. We must end these trade disputes, start negotiating new free trade agreements that include eliminating tariff and non-tariff barriers to U.S. pork, and we must be better prepared for foreign animal diseases. With that, just a quick update from U.S. Meat Export Federation as of the end of July where our exports are. You can obviously see at the end of July, Mexico, this is on, you always got to pay attention whether it's value or volume. This slide is based on volume, and so actually at the end of July, Mexico is up 3%. Why is that important? We export over 45% of our hams to Mexico. And the ham is a very, we all know, a large weight of the carcass. Anytime that drops by 20 cents a pound, it has a negative impact on our exports and the value of what we have back here. U.S. Meat Export would calculate that it's over $9 a pig in our reduced value or our reduced cutout just because of the lower value to Mexico. Obviously, China and Hong Kong, it's down 22%. That's where our variety meats go. There is added value to those variety meats if they can be exported to China. It's products that we don't utilize. Front feet in the United States are basically have no value, but if they can be exported to China, it can be as much as $2 a head. And so basically what we're really trying to do is take those primal cuts, find the highest value of each one of these. And so Mexico is hams, China is going to be those variety meats. Japan, obviously, our number 1 value export country. That's going to be very high value loins and tenderloins that go into there. But as I obviously stated earlier, we're very concerned. Throughout my time in the National Pork Producers Council, we worked very diligently on TPP. We've been withdrawn from that, and obviously right now we're very concerned for 2019 as the free trade agreements with the EU and the other TPP 11 countries becomes into effect. They're going to be able to get into that market at a much lower tariff rate than we are. We're very concerned about our market access in there, that we're going to lose our number 1 value market. Obviously Korea, with the South Korean Free Trade Agreement, has been a bright shining star, 44%. That's where our picnics and butts go. it's become a very key market, and there again, free trade agreements do work. When we lower tariff and non-tariff trade barriers, we have the ability to dramatically increase our pork exports. Pay particular attention to that'd be your right hand of the screen. You're looking at Central America, South America, the CAFTA countries, the Dominican Republic. We've had a renewed effort to the Central America and South America countries. We think we've got as median incomes increase, we've got the opportunity to be able to export more pork there. Individually, you look at them, they really don't add up, but you start layering those all on top of each other, they soon add up to the amount that's in our top 5 markets that's here right now. And you can see it's been a great that they've been up this year. Just a real quick one here to, kind of drive home. In 2017, it was $53. This would be on a value market to kind of give you an indicator of how valuable each one of these markets are to us. And it's pretty evident that Japan, with the value of the loins and tenderloin, is making up the vast majority of that on the export value. Mexico, when it comes into our hams, and obviously Hong Kong, Korea. So you kind of get a grasp on each one of those top 5 markets, really how important they are to the value of our products. So with that, I believe we're going to get started here. Thank you.